The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session on why Advanced Audit and Assurance and how you can pass it. You all know me as Tahir Kapasi. I'm the Regional Education Manager for ACCA in the Middle East. I am delighted to be joined today by Mr. Masood Parvez, who's going to be our presenter for today's session. Mr. Masood is a qualified chartered accountant with over 20 years of teaching, ACCA students across the region. His expertise lies in auditing and performance management related subjects, and he's also the academic director at Synergic Training, as well as a senior partner within a well-established auditing firm. So without further ado, it is my pleasure in sort of bringing on board Mr. Masood and passing the session over to him in order for him to take us through the remaining bits of this evening. But before I pass on to him, there are a couple of things I wanted to sort of, in terms of housekeeping rules, just wanted to clarify for you. So it is a 60-minute long session, and we expect the slides to sort of change as Mr. Masood speaks and present. Should you find that the slides are not moving, or if you're not able to hear Mr. Masood, then I would recommend you log off and log back in, and that should probably solve the issue. We've got a dedicated question and answer session towards the end, so please do park all your questions, or if you like, you can start sending them across to us via the chat box that you can see within your panel on the top left hand side of the screen. And towards the end of the session, we will do our best to address those questions as best as we possibly can. So without any further ado, over to you, Mr. Masood. Firstly, thank you for your valuable time and contributing to our sessions, adding value to our students. We appreciate your support with today's session, and I will now pass it on to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tahir, for the introduction. Hello, dear students. I hope you guys are doing good and preparing well for your exam. I again welcome all of you to this webinar on the paper of Advanced Audit and Assurance, and we will be looking at that how to pass it. I hope you guys can see my presentations. Let me share with you the agenda. I have divided this webinar into different portions. First of all, I will be discussing about the real issues faced by the students of Advanced Audit and Assurance. Then we will move to what is your role in this paper of Advanced Audit and Assurance, and how you can differentiate your role from the paper F8, which is Audit and Assurance, and Advanced Audit and Assurance. Then I will be discussing on how to build a power of expression, which is required specifically for these strategic professional exams. Then I will be focusing on that how to build a required level of professional skepticism, which is quite very much required for this particular paper. Then what different points to consider when you are reading a scenario, as your question number one, even question of the second sections as well, they are scenario based. So what are certain points to highlight, to consider whenever you are reading a scenario? Then I will move to the more technical area, that how to draft an answer. Basically, the problem with the students, they have a reasonable level of knowledge base because they have already done with auditing paper at the F8 or audit and assurance level. But the most important thing is, for this particular exam, they do not have the required skills that how to draft that particular answer. I will be discussing on risk, I will be discussing on ethics, and I will be discussing on audit reporting area. So this is the technical part which I will be sharing with you guys. Then at the last, I will be sharing few tips that how to win the marker. Basically, there are three parties involved in this whole process. One is the examiner, second one is the student, and third one is the marker. So how you are going to facilitate the marker to get passed? So I will be sharing few tips at the very end. let's start with the real issues which I have noticed faced by the students. The very first thing is that students do not have the required appetite for studies. I'm not saying at all that you guys do not study at all, but my observation is that that is not the required appetite level for the final level and the feel good factor. If you are studying and if you are feeling burdened, if you are of the view that it's really difficult, so it will not work. So you need to have an appetite for studies. You need to have a feel good factor. Now you have to identify that how to achieve that feel good factor. Maybe you develop notes, you develop certain handouts, you prepare certain PowerPoint presentation, or even you teach some junior students which are appearing in the paper Audit and Assurance. So this is few students like to have long sessions of maybe 2 hours, 3 hours. Few want to have small sessions, 30 minutes, then break. So few want to study in the morning, in the evening, late evening, night. So my first very important thing which you should take care of is the appetite, the right appetite for studies. Whenever you study, you should have a proper appetite. You should have proper books, notes, copy, whatever the requirements you should be with, and you need to develop this feel good factor. The very second important thing is, which I have noticed, that majority students attempt this particular paper of Advanced Audit and Assurance with the same mindset of your previous paper of Audit and Assurance. Your role in this particular paper is entirely different as compared to your role in paper Audit and Assurance. In Audit and Assurance, you are considered as an audit junior, or maybe an auditor, simply an auditor who is focusing more on audit procedures. But your role in paper Advanced Audit and Assurance is entirely different. Like you are placed, and I will be discussing this particular thing in detail, but you are an engagement partner, you are an audit manager. So you have to think like a manager, you have to think like a partner, and definitely you have to write like a partner as well. So this is again very important, that you should have a proper mindset for this particular paper, which should be different from the paper of Audit and Assurance, which you have already passed. This is again a very important area, lack of practical experience. If you haven't worked in an audit firm at a senior level, so it's really difficult that you have the right perspective to deal with the questions. I'm not saying that working in an audit firm is a mandatory requirement for this paper, but definitely it helps students in attempting this paper in a good manner. So this is again something which is to be considered. So if you do not have the required practical experience, you have to identify this inherent limitation with you, and you have to work on it by practicing more, by attempting more questions, and by looking for opportunities in which you can get this practical exposure. Again, students are not going for the kill. I have seen many students failing at 49, 48, 47, 46, and these are the students who have the appropriate knowledge, but somehow they are unable to cross the line because they are not fighting for each and every number. They are not fighting for each and every mark. And they develop somehow a feeling while sitting in the exam that they are passing the exam. So this is again very important. So if you have to make sure that you have to pass this exam. For that, you need to have a proper scope. When I say proper scope, that means you have to go through the books, you have to take classes, you have to have workbooks, you have to have question bank, you need to look at past papers, you need to have revision classes, you need to have mock exams. So this is my message, that you have to go for the kill. You have to make sure that you pass, and making sure needs some extra effort. Minor areas, normally students do not prepare minor areas like what you can say money laundering, like internal audit, like social and environmental audits, due diligence, forensic audits. These are small topics, And I have seen that students primarily focus on key areas like risk, planning, maybe group audits, audit reports, and they do not focus on minor areas. So minor areas will give you easy marks and they need to be respected. One very important factor is your SBR knowledge, your accounting standard knowledge. So if you're not good in accounting standards, because there is one question specifically with respect to areas to consider in a particular scenario and how you are going to achieve that audit evidence. So you have to make sure that your accounting knowledge is updated from the SBR perspective to attempt this advanced audit and assurance paper. Either you need to have refresher, or if you are studying that paper along with this paper, this is good. Or even if you have passed 6 months back or 3 months back, you have to refresh your memories with respect to accounting standards knowledge. So these are few issues or important areas which you have to take care of. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that I will be discussing about your role in this paper, audit and assurance, and this is very important thing to understand. If you look at different scenarios, you are placed as an engagement partner. The question says you are the engagement partner of ABC client or whatsoever the case is, or you are the audit manager. Now, generally, what an engagement partner or an audit manager is doing in an audit firm, I hope you guys understand that engagement partner is dealing with either to accept a client or not. Engagement partner is dealing with the planning considerations, setting maturity levels, maybe reviewing the whole work performed by the audit team, and then at the end looking at the reporting part. So these are key areas of this particular paper. If you look at risk, it is one of the important area. Like you can name it planning and risk assessment. It's an important area. Then group audits, again, planning and risk assessment plus group audits is an important area. Then either to accept a client. Audit quality. Audit quality is not discussed in detail at the audit and assurance level. So audit quality is specifically something to be considered when you are dealing with this paper of Advanced Audit and Assurance, both ISA 220 and ISQC 1. So you should be knowing the difference and what are the requirements for audit quality, and then the reporting part. So your role in this particular paper, let me emphasize, is entirely different from the paper you have attempted at your fundamentals, which is audit and assurance. There you are required to perform certain procedures, maybe testing non-current assets assertions, maybe testing certain sales assertions, or maybe testing certain systems or controls. But in this particular paper, you will be focusing more on planning and risk assessment. You will be focusing more on audit quality, either to accept or professional issues faced. Ethics is again one of the important area, the review process and the reporting. So your mindset should be in accordance with your role of this particular paper. And one more important thing is that the intellectual levels defined by ACCA, and at this level, your intellectual level is third, which is synthesis and evaluation. So synthesis and evaluation needs an ability to identify, explain, and then you have to conclude as well. So this is again very important that you should have a conclusive frame of mind. If you identify something, you explain it at length, then you have to be conclusive and decisive, because you are the partner, you are the manager, you are the engagement partner or the reviewing partner or the quality assurance partner. So this is very important to identify or to keep this in mind, that your role in this particular paper is different. Now, building a power of expression. Being a partner, you have to think like a partner. You have to write like a partner. So it's really, really important that you develop a power of expression. Now, one way of developing of that power of expression is that you work in some audit firm as an audit manager, senior audit manager, or as an engagement partner, which is not the case, because still you are a student and you have limited opportunities to have that particular post, and definitely it will be achieved over a period of time. Now, how to overcome this inherent limitation that you do not have the required power of expression for this particular paper? So my strong recommendation is you should write on daily basis. This is the key to passing this exam. Write 2 to 3 hours on a daily basis. Attempt internal tests, whatever wherever you are studying, in any college, or even if you are studying at home or yourself. So you should be looking for opportunities in which you should appear in internal tests, internal term order tests, taught exams, mock exams. Reason being, because those mock exams and internal tests will give you an opportunity to get evaluated. And you know, getting evaluated, getting a feedback from your teachers, from your tutors, from your trainers is an excellent way to improve and to build a certain power of expression. Third thing is, you have to attempt past papers questions carefully and try to focus on the wordings of that answers. If you look at past paper solutions, they are excellently designed. I fully understand that the objective of those past paper answers is to give answers and to give knowledge as well. But if you take a very small example, that whenever he's referring the past paper solutions are referring to some standards, they name it and they give the number as well, which is not a mandatory requirement, but it is recommended that if you are mentioning some accounting standard with the name or with the number, you have to mention the name as well, and it gives the marker you know, a very good feeling that you are very well prepared for your exam. So my important message with respect to building a power of expression: either you are already working in some audit firm at some senior level, you are dealing with clients with respect to acceptance, with respect to quality, with respect to planning, risk assessment, reviewing, reporting. So you have that skill set. But if it is not the case, which is the case in majority of the students, majority students do not have that opportunity, or they are not working. So this is again your inherent limitation, because you do not have the required power of expression which is required to pass this advanced audit exam. And this is one of the reasons that whenever students write, they write in a very non-professional way. They write in a very simple language, which is not the requirement. You have to have a power of expression which is technical, which includes technical terminologies, professional jargons. So they are somehow required. And the only way to achieve this power of expression is to write on daily basis, attempt questions, test, and past paper. Read past papers, solutions carefully, and try to reproduce them. Definitely you have to understand and reproduce. So this is again very, very important. Again, one issue which I have seen in majority of the students, they do not have the required professional skepticism. They are not thinking critically, especially if a question is about business risk, how to identify and how to, if it is required to look for audit risks, and you have identified a business risk, so how you link that business risk with financial statement risk. So professional skepticism again required a practical experience. You are working somewhere, you are dealing with different clients on a regular basis, you are dealing with technical issues and problems on a regular basis. So this is required to build the required level of professional skepticism. You need to have a questioning mind. Majority students at the P7 level or at the advanced audit level, they do not have the required questioning mind or the critical thinking. Like if I talk about question of risk, there are many inherent risks which are in the scenario, but students are unable to identify because they are not that much critical in their thinking, and they are unable to link those risks with even going concern evaluation or going concern assumptions. So an auditor does not believe in unanswered honesty. So how to build this required level of professional skepticism? One way, either to work into the audit firm at some good level, senior levels, a managerial level, partner level. If that is not the case, so this is again your inherent limitation, that you do not have that level of skepticism which is required for this advanced audit and assurance paper. Now, how to build that level of skepticism? Like I already said, one way is to have a practical experience, and second way is to attempt as many questions as possible. Give yourself different scenarios, give yourself new questions again and again, and try to identify areas and issues according to the requirement of the questions. So this is again very important to build the required professional skepticism. So let me give you a recap, quick recap. I have discussed few real issues with you guys. Then I have emphasized on your role for the paper audit, advanced audit and assurance. It is quite different from the paper audit and assurance. Then we discussed building a power of expression, which is the main issue for this particular exam. You do not have that quality of writing and you fail. You have the knowledge, but you fail because that power of expression is not up to the mark. Then I have overemphasized on building a required professional skepticism, which is required at this level, because you are reviewing certain things. Even if you are at the review phase, you have to be very skeptical. At the planning stage, at the client acceptance stage, you need to have a knowledge, but you need to have the required professional skepticism to identify areas which need attention, or to have a questioning mind, or to have the critical thinking which is required. Now, coming to the more technical part, that whenever you are reading a scenario, so what are certain points to consider whenever you are reading a particular scenario? So the very first thing which I have identified is either it is a first year audit or a recurring audit. Your life will be entirely different if it is a first year audit or if it is a recurring audit, because in first year audit you need to have certain additional considerations to be considered, like there are certain preliminary planning activities which might not be required in case of recurring audits. Then if you talk about opening balances, this is again one of the standard which is not applicable in that true spirit if you are going for recurring audits, because already you have audited the previous period closing balances. But if you have audited, if you haven't audited, or it is your first year audit and the client is shifted from any other audit firm, so you need to focus on the opening balances inherently. If the question is about planning and you are planning for a certain client which is a first year audit, you need to have certain additional planning considerations in place. The very first thing which you have to identify while reading a scenario is that either it's a first year audit or recurring audit. You have to highlight it, you have to underline it, and you have to think accordingly. Rather, I suggest that you should develop a table that what is different in case of a recurring audit planning and risk assessment as compared to when you are going for a audit for the first time. The second thing which you need to consider is the industry of the client. Majority questions are specifying the industry. Now, when I said industry of the client, if I being at your place and I have to make sure that I have to pass this particular exam in this coming attempt, I will list down 10 industries, important industries, and I will list down their key business risks. And I will place that particular thing in my room somewhere, and I will keep on looking on that on a daily basis, or maybe many times in a day, because the question is industry specific. And if you have a particular knowledge of a certain industry, I fully understand you have to take care of the scenario. Whatever is written in the scenario, you have to take care of it. But definitely whatever is in the scenario is with respect to that industry. And if you have a detailed knowledge that what are key business risks of this particular industry, or you have read few audit reports of public listed companies of different sectors and industry, it will facilitate you in a very good manner to have a grip on the scenario. And if you are reading a particular question, and if it is a specific industry and you have already worked on that industry, like you know the key of business risks, you have a knowledge about, you have read few audit reports of those industry organizations, so it gives you a certain level of comfort and confidence. So this is my second important point to deal with scenarios. You have to identify the industry, and the preparation is, like I mentioned, you should work on at least 8 to 10 top industries. What are their issues? What are their auditing issues? What are their financial statement risks? What are their accounting standard application issues? What are their business risks? So you can guess up to a certain level that what sort of a question will be coming in the exam if you work industry wise. Next is it a listed company? Because scenario is different if it is a listed company. If you are attempting a question with respect to ethics, scenario is entirely different, because for listed there are certain more stringent regulation as compared to an unlisted company. So identify that, highlight that is it a listed company or is it a unlisted company, and then you have to set your course of action in accordance with the requirements. Rather, you can prepare a small checklist, and the checklist is given in few study notes, that what is different in a listed company and what is different in an unlisted company from the ethics perspective or from other areas as well. Moving forward, you have to consider your role in the scenario. I have already overemphasized on this particular point. Like you being an engagement partner, then you have to think like a partner, write like a partner. If you are an audit manager or senior audit manager, so you identify your role in the scenario. What is your specific role in the scenario? This is again very, very important for long questions. Next important thing to identify in any scenario is the phase of audit. What is the phase of audit? Is it a planning phase? Is it a planning or risk assessment phase, execution phase, review phase, and reporting? Because if you are talking about planning and risk assessment phase, then you have to look for the 300 series standards. Like you have to take care of ISA 300, 315, 320, and 330. Your life will revolve around these 4 documents, because nothing is outside these 4 documents. Either you are planning or you are identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement by understanding the entity and its environment. Either you are talking about 320, which is audit materiality, or you are talking about 330, which is auditor responses in relation to assess risk. Identify it. If it is a planning stage, you have to pull your knowledge with respect to planning and risk assessment, and these 4 documents will primarily be facilitating you in developing an answer. If it is an execution phase, definitely 500 series is going to play a good role in that. Like if you are talking about going concern, subsequent events, related party transactions, audit sampling. So again, you have to be very careful, and 600 series as well, according to group audits and using the work of internal audit and expert. So you have to classify what is the phase of audit. Then you have to take care of that particular phase, and you have to use that specific knowledge which you have already. I'm assuming that you have the required knowledge, and then you have to utilize that particular knowledge for that phase. Now, if you are at the review phase, again, life is like in review phase, subsequent events need to be considered on a very high side. Again, you have to evaluate the going concern assumption at the later stages. So review phase is having a different mindset which you are required to be in place. And if you are talking about reporting, then you have to look and take care of the 700 series documents in which you need to take care of audit reports, modifications, CAM, emphasis of matter, other matter, comparatives, and auditor responsibility with respect to other information. So I hope I have made my point clear that you have to identify in this particular scenario that what is the phase of audit. Is it a planning stage? You have to have the frame of mind with respect to planning and risk assessment standards. If it is execution, then you have to think accordingly. Review, like I said, there are few standards which are very important at the review stage. And if you're talking about reporting, again, certain other standards need to be taken care of. Then the requirement verbs. Normally, students do not respect requirement verbs. Normally, whenever there is an and, you will find a requirement verb after that. Identify and explain. Whenever there is a comma, you need a requirement. So you have to underline what are requirement verbs, 2, 3, 4, whatever requirement verbs are there. You have to make sure that you attempt or you complete your answer with respect to all the requirement verbs. In many cases, student might give more focus on one requirement verb and they give less focus on the second one and they lose marks. So you have to be very, very certain that what are the requirement verbs. Then marks allocation. Now, sometimes there's a question, identify and explain. And the question is of 15 marks, and how you can differentiate or how you can allocate marks between identification and explanation. This you can do by looking at the past paper marking schemes in which you can have a fair idea that how marks are to be allocated. But while sitting in the exam, if inherently you think there is some area which is difficult or which require more energy, which require more skills to answer, so definitely that particular area might be attracting more marks. So while sitting in the exam, you have to make sure that what should be the marks allocation if it is a question about 2-3 requirements. So again, you have to be taking care of this. So I hope you guys will make a list of all these things, and you will ensure while sitting in the exam that you work on these areas, identify these areas. And the key point in this particular slide is industry specific knowledge. If you are not working, if you do not have extraordinary professional experience, it doesn't matter. But what does matter is that you should identify 8 to 10 key industries. You should document the key risks of those industries. You should read audit reports related to those areas, and it is going to make a difference. Now let's talk about drafting an answer. This is one of my key concerns about this paper, Advanced Audit and Assurance, that whenever students draft, they do not respect the components which should be there in an answer. Like if you are attempting a question regarding risks, so these are 4 areas, rather 5 areas, which needs to be considered. First of all, identification of risk area is important. Give the heading. You have to give the heading like revenue recognition, like government grants, like provisions, contingent assets and liabilities. So you will get at least half marks of giving the heading. Secondly, if you are attempting a question of risk, you have to identify what is the issue, what is the risk. And normally it is a copy paste from the scenario. You have to read the scenario, issue is there written in the scenario. All you have to do is just to reproduce that scenario from the questions into the answer sheet. Next, you have to talk about the materiality element. Okay, you have identified an issue. Then you have to calculate the materiality. In majority audit risk questions and in financial statement risk questions, you are given data to calculate materiality. And I hope you guys have detailed knowledge that our materiality levels are generally quantitative thresholds, which may be a percentage of sale, net profit, total assets, accordingly, whatever certain parameters are available. So you have to identify it, rather you have to calculate. Okay, I have given the heading, fine. I have reproduced the issue from the scenario, fine. I have to mention that what is, if data is available, so you have to quantify, is it material or it is not material. Then why you think it's an issue? The very first thing is you have identified the issue and materiality level and why you think it's an issue. Now here you need to have your technical knowledge with you. You have to reproduce the requirement of the standard. You have to reproduce this requirement of relevant IFRS, that in accordance with this particular standard, if you are mentioning the number, do mention the name. So these are the parameters to recognize the revenue. So that's why I am of the view that there is a risk. And at the last, you have to discuss about the implications, the impact, and normally they need to be quantified. Like if management is doing this, that means revenue is wrongly recognized because this is not in accordance with particular standard, which I mentioned earlier. So revenue is overstated by this amount, liabilities are understated by this amount. Whatever impact you can calculate on profit and loss, on statement of financial positions, or maybe the impact on the disclosures. So you have to quantify, you have to mention the implication. Let me revise this particular area. If a question is about risk, and primarily the question is about financial statement risks or audit risk, the very first thing is you need to give a heading. Secondly, what is the issue? You have to identify the issue, which is a copy-paste scenario in many cases. Then you have to quantify that particular issue. Is it material? Is it not material? Then you have to look into the fact that why you think it's an issue. You have to support yourself with respect to the technical knowledge of certain accounting standard. And then you have to quantify it, that because this is not in accordance with the requirements, so these are the implications on the financial statements. Definitely implications you are able to compute or calculate when data is available in the exam. Okay, so I have taken an example from your September December sample answer. I was just going through this particular paper and I have came across a question of risk. So I tried to what you can say, bring it to the table just to link whatever I have said earlier. The very first thing I recommended is to give a heading. So the heading is given in the answer, government grant. This is the area. Okay. Secondly, what is the issue? So it is normally a copy paste from the scenario. The group receive a government grant of 20 million. If the 20 million grant receipt have not been recognized in full as income this year, the projected group profit before tax would be this. The recognition as income is therefore extremely significant to the group financial statements. This represents 4.2% of the projected group assets and therefore material to the group statements of financial position. So the very first thing is give a heading. Second, identify the issue. Third, talk about materiality levels. Now, why do you think it's an issue? Like I just discussed with you guys. Now, the answer is the grant should be accounted for in accordance with ISA 20, accounting for government grants and disclosure of government assistance, which require government grants to be recognized in profit or loss on a systematic basis over the period in which the entity recognizes an expense, the related cost for which. So the requirement of the standard is need to be there. So you should be very well equipped with the accounting standard knowledge to even discuss about financial statement risks. And I mentioned earlier, there is another question on areas to consider and how you, so there's a lot of relevance of paper SPR in this particular paper. And the last important thing is implications. Therefore, the audit risk is that group profit is overstated by a maximum amount of 20 million. The liabilities are understated by the same amount. The accounting treatment could be a deliberate attempt to enhance the appearance of the group profit for the year, and this issue should be approached with a degree of professionalism. So I think I have made my point very clear. The sequence or the drafting of the answer with respect to risk is to be carefully considered. Give a heading, what is the issue, talk about materiality, why you think it's an issue, link it with accounting standards, requirements, and the implications. Now, I have chosen another area, which is ethics. So there is a question on professional and ethical issues in every attempt. So let's look at the key area. There are 5 areas which I have identified. The very first thing is identification of the ethical issue. Give a heading, like same as the case, like if it is a referral fee issue, is it an internal audit issue? Is it a partner to serve on audit committee issue? What is the issue? Give the heading of that particular issue. Then you have to define the issue, which is simply a copy paste from the scenario. Then why you think it's an issue? In this particular case, you have to link that issue with your threats. And I hope you guys are very well aware of your threats, which can be self-interest, which can be self-review, which can be familiarity, which can be intimidation and advocacy. Now, one very important factor to remember in this particular area is that when you are linking a particular issue with the threat, so you have to be very, very careful, because examiner have given these comments many times that students try to link that issue with 2-3 threats and to have a hate and try basis, let's see. So there you lose marks. You have to be very certain. You should have the appropriate knowledge. You should have attempted past papers, practice questions, and you need to have a proper clarity that either this issue is self-interest or this issue is self-interest and familiarity, or maybe intimidation and other areas as well. So this is need to be considered. Then the significance of the threat is another area. Like either that particular area is significant or not, the value. If you are talking about any self-interest threat, seniority of staff, if there is a familiarity issue, impact to the audit firm, maybe if you are taking assurance and non-assurance simultaneously, and then the materiality element as well. Again, the 4th important area is with respect to significance. And the last area, which is the 5th one, is the remedial actions and conclusion. Do not forget to conclude, because that is somehow required. So review the work. Normal remedial actions are review by some independent person. It's a very common remedial action. Sell the shares, very common. Having a Chinese wall, very common. Not accepting the engagement, removing the person from the team, rotation extra, etc. So you need to be certain that you attempt or draft that particular answer in accordance with these 5 areas. Give a heading, copy paste the issue from the scenario with few modifications if required in wordings. Then why you think it's an issue, link that particular issue with your threats. Then talk about significance of the threats. What is the significance? And then talk about the remedial action, and at the end give a conclusive remarks that what is your suggested course of action. Again, I have selected the same paper from your September-December sample. It's a sample exam, and there is an issue with respect to referral fee. So the very first point is referral fees. You have given the heading. The issue is the group audit committee understand that the Square & Co cannot provide a corporate finance service, but could recommend another firm Ranger Associate for this work for which the firm would earn a referral fee. This is the issue. Now, why you think it's an issue? Definitely, you have to link that particular issue with certain threats. So the court states that this creates a self-interest threat to objectivity and to professional competence and due care. The self-interest threat arises from the income generated from the referral, and this may result in an audit firm recommending another firm for the work without proper consideration. So that is the issue. Your main issue is self-interest threat. Now, you have to talk about the significance of the threat. The code does not prohibit a referral fee, but the significance of the threat should be evaluated and safeguard applied to reduce the threat to an acceptable level. And let's look at the remedial action. Safeguards may include disclosing to the group in writing the arrangement for the referral fee to be received from Ranger Associates, obtaining advance agreement from the group that the arrangement is acceptable. Therefore, the matter should be discussed again with the group audit committee, and if the committee confirms agreement with the proposed referral fee, Square & Co. can recommend Rangers Associate to perform. So there's a conclusion. It's not an open-ended discussion. You know, your intellectual level is the third level, which is synthesis and evaluation. So you have to be conclusive at this particular level. You cannot leave the discussion open in the exam. You have to be conclusive. So that's why if you are attempting a question with respect to ethics, these 5 areas to be considered. Given heading, identify the issue, link that issue with the threats, talk about the significance and materiality and remedial actions, and at the end, go for the conclusion. Okay, so 2 areas. The third area I have selected is audit report, which is my favorite area, by the way. So again, I have given few areas or few points to consider. First of all, whenever you are attempting a question, normally a question is that this is the scenario. Now, do you think this is an appropriate report? Or even if you are asked to draft some report contents, whatever the question is, if there's a typical question about the impact on the audit report, or you have given a scenario in which a certain level of report is being suggested, like a qualified opinion or maybe an adverse or a disclaimer. So these steps to be followed. First of all, you have to look into the fact that either it's a conflict with management or a scope limitation. So you need to be very clearly understanding that conflict normally arises on treatment of accounting policies or accounting standards, you know, and scope limitations primarily with respect to management is not providing you the information or not giving you the required documents, not giving access to any personnel. So identify, is it a conflict or scope limitation? Secondly, you have to be certain, is it material or it is material and pervasive? Because if it is material, then you have an option. Rather, you have to go for a qualified opinion. But if it is material and pervasive, so in case of a conflict, you have to have an adverse opinion. And in case of scope limitation, you should go for a disclaimer of opinion. Again, it's a very tricky area to quantify, is it material or material and pervasive. Again, you can develop your understanding by attempting more questions again and again and again. And from there, you will be making yourself sure and certain that how to classify it in terms of either it's material or it's material and pervasive. Moving forward, discuss with management. Definitely, if it is something, even if it's a conflict or even if it's a scope limitation, material or material and pervasive, we have to discuss with management to get it sorted. If there is a conflict, management agrees, there will be no implications on the audit report. So implications will be there in case of a disagreement. If management disagree to that particular thing, then you have to make sure if it is material, you might go for a qualified opinion, and if it is material and pervasive, you go for an adverse opinion. Same the case with scope limitation. And then you have to draft, maybe if the question is about drafting, So you might be required to draft the basis of opinion paragraph, which may be qualified, adverse, or disclaimer of opinion. I have included one small example which I developed myself. Like the very first thing I said, like I'm assuming that it's a qualified opinion and the qualification is due to conflict with management, and definitely that particular conflict is material. First of all, you have to identify the conflict, write down the conflict. What is the conflict? So no depreciation is provided in the financial statement by the management. This is your conflict. Okay, then why you think it's an issue, or why you think it's a conflict? So link that with the accounting standard. Like, this is not in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. Specify the requirement of the standard. So you have to identify the conflict. Like I'm talking about, what should be the content of that basis of qualified opinion paragraph. You might be asked to draft that qualification due to conflict. So identify the conflict, why you think it's a conflict. Okay, link that conflict with the requirement of the standards. And the third thing is impact. Quantify the impact. You need to quantify it somehow, that if this is the case, so the profit for the year will be overstated by this amount. Depreciation in this particular case, accumulated depreciation will be understated. Whatsoever the case is, you have to quantify it, because normally when we go for the opinion paragraph, we have to refer to the basis of qualified opinion paragraph. Again, my important message is the drafting of these paragraphs needs to be carefully considered. Okay, so I have discussed a few things with respect to risk. Kindly take care of these components of your answer. I have given you an example from your past papers or your reference paper. Then ethics, you have to take care of these contents. And then with respect to audit reports. At the very end, how to win the marker, how to facilitate the marker. Like I already said, there are three parties involved in this particular game. You, the student, examiner who have set the exam, and marker who is marking your exam. So you have to make the marker happy somehow. How to facilitate this? So the best thing is you have in this particular paper, try to use as many as golden words just to give the impression to the marker that you have the appropriate knowledge. And whenever a marker is reading a particular scenario or your answer or paragraph, and if it is finding few golden words, so it gives a certain level of indication or comfort to the marker that your writing is at the appropriate level. Like if you talk about audit evidence, we normally use the word sufficient, appropriate audit evidence. If you are identifying any responsibility, like what's the auditor's responsibility regarding analytical procedures? So you said the auditor should apply analytical procedures at the planning stage as risk assessment procedures. So the point I'm going to make it is you need to have more golden words in your answer. The next very important thing is requirement specific answer. Many students think that they should write whatever they know. This is not the solution. You should be writing what is required. What is required? You have to give a requirement specific answer. If you do not give a requirement specific answer, definitely, because the marking scheme have already specified, because marker is with the marking scheme specified by the examiner. So he is marking your paper in accordance with that marking scheme. And if you do not find the requirement specific answers, or there is a lack in that, definitely you will lose marks. So again, this is very important. And as your coming attempt is manual, so one of the facilitation you can do to the marker is you need to have a lot of white space in your answer script. That means you should have some space on the left-hand side, some space on the right-hand side as well, and don't try to what you can say, just write appropriately. And you need to have a certain level of white portion. It should not be all white somehow, but you need to have a certain white portion in your because it should give a good feel to the eyes of the marker as well. Writing is again very important, so you should have a good writing. You should be readable. I have seen many students who their writing is not readable as well. So this problem can be overcome when you guys will be fully shifted to computer-based exam. But in case of a manual exam, writing is again very, very important. One last thing, be aware of excessive writing. Do not try to impress the examiner. If you know certain things which are according to or which are with respect to certain topic and they are not required, so there is no need to write, because you are offending the marker somehow by writing irrelevant stuff. Try to be requirement specific and try to avoid excessive writing. So this is all from my side. Now I would like to have any questions from you guys. So Tahir, do we have any questions to answer?
Yes, Mr. There's been a lot of questions coming in, and I'm just going to literally start reading some of those out for you. I mean, in the interest of time, you know, we might have to just select a couple of them, but I've had an initial view of these, and I think the really important ones, in the interest of all the audiences attending, I think I'm going to ask them out to you here. So there's one question coming from a student that says, have sat and failed this exam twice previously with a 45 and a 47. Should I be regurgitating knowledge again, or would it be the right thing to practice past exam papers and exam technique? If past exam papers, how many should I typically be practicing before the exam?
You know, I have discussed this issue in detail in my presentation. Failing an exam at 47, 48, 45 means that you do not have a big knowledge issue, but your power of expression and your drafting of the answer need to be improved. For that, I have already emphasized that you have to attempt questions again and again. You have to draft the answer. You have to even engage your tutors to send them that draft and require them to give certain feedbacks which are already there when you are attempting mock exams or taught exam. We carefully evaluate the answers given by the students and give them feedback. But as this particular student is mentioning that unfortunately failed twice, I strongly recommend that you should attempt as many as questions, and I have mentioned the components of the answer with respect to risk, ethics, and other areas. So try to follow that sequence. And one more suggestion is that you can attempt questions, and if you find your tutor or even your seniors somehow, and give them that particular answer for their feedback. So that feedback is very, very important.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Masood. So there's another question from a student that says, I'm planning to do the Advanced Audit and Assurance exam. However, I do not have any work experience. Are there any tips that you could give me to make sure this does not turn out to be a disadvantage?
Already identified that, you know, the perfect situation is you are working in the firm, you have the required experience of 2 to 3 years, but this is not a mandatory requirement to attempt this paper. But this is your inherent limitation. You have to take care of that inherent limitation by putting extra effort. You know, a person working in an audit firm might require less effort as compared to a person who is not working in an audit firm. And all these optional papers require a certain level of substance. If you do not have that substance, definitely you will not be passing. But the critical part with respect to this Advanced Audit and Assurance paper is because it's a theory paper. If you look at other papers, you have a comfort of numerics somehow. But if you talk about this particular paper, your power of expression is the key, which needs to be developed by attempting writing more. You know, students, whenever, even in classes, when we used to give questions to students, they just read it, they just highlight, and they said, this is the issue, sir, this is the issue, this is the issue, this is, they do not write. They said, we will write in the exam, but how come you can produce an extraordinary script for the first time if you haven't practiced it? So I think the most important thing is, yes, this is an inherent limitation if you are not working in the firm, but this is not a mandatory requirement to attempt this. If it is the case, ACC have already you know, placed some barrier on it. So there is no barrier, but you should identify that this is your inherent limitation, and you have to put extra effort by attempting more questions and developing the required skills, level of skepticism, carefully reading the answers, and try to be as close as compared to the suggested answers.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Another question that we have from a student is, how important are, you know, the reiteration of the numbers and the names of the standards? Is it a huge advantage, or?
Actually, I attended a conference of auditing teachers back in 2014 in Sri Lanka. We were 20-25 in a room, and you know, there's a conflict that either we should recommend student to mention there is a split, by the way. Mentioning the number and name is not a mandatory requirement, but if you talk my suggestions, I always recommend that you should be knowing the number and the name, because if you look at the suggested answers, they mention the number and they mention the name. They haven't said, according to one of the auditing standards, this is the requirement. So my suggestion is that you should be mentioning the number and name, but this is not a mandatory requirement, and there is a split between teachers, tutors of this audit exam, because majority think that number and name should not be there, but there are few which think that it gives a good impression. But it all depends how much time you have, are you committed to, but if you are certain, then you have to write the number and name.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Masood. I think we will sort of pause there and break with the questions for the day. I mean, I would just like to take really this opportunity quickly to draw everybody's attention towards the, you know, dedicated study support resources that we have for our students. So, you know, you are about 2 weeks away typically from your exams. You know, you should now be thinking about, you know, supplementing everything that you've done, all of these notes, your lectures, your tutors, advices, you know, your classes, with things like, you know, past papers, past exams, mock exams. Also, you know, look at the examiners' comments, examiners' articles. They are quite critical, they are quite useful, and you will all find all of those resources on our study support resources section on ACCA's website, which is www.accaglobal.com. These are all available there out for you, you know, so make sure you make the most of these available resources. I will also take this opportunity to point out everyone into the direction of our ACCA Middle East Content Hub. This is the specific content hub that we have built for our students and members and affiliates in the Middle East. Every event, whether there is a student support session or a CPD event or anything that we do, you know, the recordings of these are actually then put up on our social media platforms or the ACCA Middle East Hub. So please do take note of the content hub, which is www.accame.me. And for those of you that have been asking the questions around, you know, how can we get hold of the recording of this session, how can we get hold of the slides, they will all be available on our local Middle East content hub for you all. This is how you will stay in touch with us. Should you have any other questions, concerns, you know, feel free to get in touch with us, and we'll be more than happy to answer you. I've also got a slide here with Mr. Masood's contact details. Here's Mr. Masood's contact details, just in case you wanted to get in touch with him for a burning question or wanted to get some of your, sort of immediate questions answered. Mr. Masood, before we close off the session formally for this evening, any final words from your end?
I think the most important thing is to keep on putting effort, stay happy, stay optimistic, and that's it. I think this is the key to success. Stay happy, keep on putting efforts. You have to stay optimistic and believe in success. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you very much for these wise final words of yours. I mean, I'm sure our students have been able to, get a lot of value out of the session today and have really enjoyed. I mean, audit and assurance being one of my favorite subjects, and I've actually, when I did my HCCA exams, I did the Advanced Audit and Assurance subject, as one of my optional exams. I've actually really enjoyed listening to you, and I wish, I would have had access to tutors, expert tutors like yourself when I was studying back in the days, and thank you so much for your time and your valuable contribution. I'm sure all our attendees and our students have found a lot of value out of this. Thank you to all our students who turned up and attended the session. Good luck with your upcoming exams. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.